Two of the Emperor's sons are awake, and they haven't met yet. That sentence alone should terrify every enemy of the Imperium, because Roboute, Guilliman, and Lionel Johnson are not just two powerful warriors who happen to survive 10,000 years. They are the two most strategically gifted minds the Emperor ever created, now loose in a galaxy that has spent a millennium learning to function without them. And when they finally stand in the same room, the conversation they have could reshape the course of human history. But to understand what that meeting will look like, you first need to understand what both of these men have been through to get there, because they haven't just been sitting in waiting rooms. They've both been doing things, seeing things, and carrying knowledge that the other desperately needs. Let's start with Guilliman, because his story came first. Roboute Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines and architect of the Codex Astartes, spent almost 10,000 years frozen in stasis at the heart of Macragge. He wasn't dead. He was suspended in a temporal bubble, mortally wounded by the poisoned blade of his own brother Fulgrim during the Horus Heresy, kept alive by a stasis field that held the moment of his death permanently at bay. For 10 millennia, his sons built an entire culture of mourning around his frozen form. Then Evrain arrived, an emissary of Inid, the newborn Eldari god of the dead. She channeled enough divine power through the ancient Eldari artifact known as the Sword of Dawnlight to pull Guilliman back from the knife edge between life and death. His wounds were healed. His armor was rebuilt, partly with components of Eldari Wraithbone, and became known as the Armor of Fate. Belisarius Cawl, the ancient and eccentric archmagos of the Adeptus Mechanicus who had spent 10,000 years quietly working on special projects under Guilliman's pre-heresy instructions, had the new armor and weapons ready, and then Roboute Guilliman, the avenging son, woke up. He went to Terra. He stood before the Golden Throne and looked at what remained of his father. That meeting is not described in full in any text, but what we know is this: Guilliman came out of it changed. The experience was overwhelming and contradictory, reflecting the Emperor's shattered, immensely powerful, and non-human psyche. Guilliman did not hear a simple conversation, but rather a torrent of conflicting thoughts and intense psychic projections, described as a choir of voices coming into his mind. The Emperor addressed him with warmth, but also coldness. He referred to Guilliman as his last hope, but also last tool. Not his son, but also his son. Whatever all that meant, Guilliman left shaken in a way that 10,000 years in stasis and a mortal wound had not managed. He understood. Whatever was left of the Emperor, it was no longer his father. What he did next was throw himself into work with the furious energy of a man trying to outrun grief. He launched the Indomitus Crusade, the largest military mobilization since the Emperor's own Great Crusade, fielding fleets and armies across hundreds of fronts simultaneously. He unleashed the Primaris Space Marines, the new breed of enhanced warrior that Cawl had spent 10,000 years developing in secret. He tore apart the bloated, corrupt structure of the High Lords of Terra and rebuilt imperial governance with the ruthless efficiency of someone who had written the rulebook on how empires are supposed to function. He became imperial regent, the closest thing to an emperor the Imperium has had since the Golden Throne consumed its occupant. Here's the problem, though. The Indomitus Crusade could only go so far, because the galaxy had been split in half. The Cicatrix Maledictum, also called the Great Rift, is a galaxy-spanning wound in reality that tore open. This happened following the fall of Cadia during Abaddon, the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade. It stretches from the Eye of Terror in the galactic northwest all the way to the eastern fringe, dividing the Imperium into two. The half that still receives the light of the Astronomicon, the psychic beacon on Terra that allows navigators to guide ships through the warp, is called the Imperium Sanctus. The dark half, cut off from that light, isolated, battered from every direction, is called the Imperium Nihilus. Guilliman can operate in the Sanctus. The Nihilus is another problem entirely, and that problem has a name. Lionel Johnson the First, the Primarch of the Dark Angels, the first Space Marine Legion ever created, disappeared at the end of the Horus Heresy during the destruction of his homeworld Caliban. His treacherous second-in-command, Luther, corrupted by the slow influence of chaos, had led a rebellion. The two men fought. Caliban itself cracked open under the psychic violence of the duel. When the dust settled, Luther was broken in mind and soul, Caliban was gone, sucked into the warp, and Lionel Johnson had vanished. What nobody knew, except the Emperor himself and the mysterious hooded figures called the Watchers in the Dark, was that the lion hadn't died. He had been taken deep into the bowels of the rock, the shattered asteroid that was all that remained of Caliban, and placed in a healing sleep. The Dark Angels built their fortress monastery around him and never knew he was there. He slept for 10,000 years. When he woke, it wasn't to the sound of an alarm or the hand of a battle brother shaking his shoulder. He woke alone in a forest. This is where the lion's story gets strange in a way that matters for understanding what he'll bring to his reunion with Guilliman. The realm he awoke in was not the physical galaxy. It was a mysterious subdimension connected to the warp, a pocket realm that appeared to him as a ghostly recreation of the forests of his lost homeworld, Caliban. He would later come to call it Mirror Caliban, and he had no memory at first of who he was. He wandered those spectral forests, slowly piecing himself back together, guided in part by the Watchers in the Dark, those small hooded beings who have never fully explained themselves to anyone. And in those forests, he met someone. The figure appeared as an old king, seated by a river, fishing. The waters around this man seemed to sing, and this mysterious figure, wounded and waiting, clearly meant something. The Watchers told the lion he was not asking the right question. The imagery is deliberate, drawn from Arthurian legend, the Fisher King, a wounded sovereign whose injury mirrors the suffering of his kingdom, who waits for a worthy knight to ask the right question and heal him. The symbolism is not subtle. The lion's entire existence has always carried an Arthurian quality, and this vision in Mirror Caliban is the most explicit version of it. The old king by the river is in every way the lore gestures at, a metaphor for the emperor, wounded, waiting, his kingdom rotting around him, the healing contingent on someone finally asking the right question, and the lion didn't get an answer in that forest. But he came out carrying the question. He also came out with something extraordinary, the ability to forest walk. By stepping into Mirror Caliban, Lionel Johnson can focus on any location in the galaxy and emerge there, crossing impossible distances in moments. He can bring others with him. It is a power that makes him uniquely capable of operating in a fragmented, isolated Imperium Nihilus, where conventional travel is slow, dangerous, and unpredictable. So the lion appeared seemingly from nowhere on the worlds of the Imperium Nihilus. He found the Fallen, the Dark Angels, who had been scattered into the warp when Caliban died and had spent 10,000 years fighting, surviving, and in many cases resisting the corruption of chaos. He called those uncorrupted ones the Risen, pardoned them, and took them as his companions. And he began striking at the enemies of humanity wherever he forest walked, moving like a ghost between the stars. The legend of him spread faster than any official communication could. People who had never heard the name Lionel Johnson whispered about a cowled giant, an unforgiving knight, a figure who appeared from ancient forests and slaughtered monsters before vanishing again. He fought the 10,000 Eyes war band. He fought the fallen sorcerer Lord Seraphax, who captured him briefly and revealed a plan to use the lion's soul as a puppet to kill the emperor and trigger a forced apotheosis. But the lion won. He carved out a series of protected worlds in the Imperium Nihilus and formally established the Lion's Protectorate, a compact of worlds that chose to shelter under his name. And then came the Arcs of Omen, and with it, the battle that changed everything. Commander Dante, Chapter Master of the Blood Angels, is one of the oldest living Space Marines in the Imperium, who is not interred in a dreadnought. He has been fighting for over 1,500 years. He wears the golden death mask of Sanguinius, his Primarch, sculpted into an angelic face that conceals whatever the weight of centuries has done to his own. Guilliman named him Regent of the Imperium Nihilus, which sounds like an honor, and is mostly just a polite way of saying that somebody had to hold the dark half of a broken galaxy together, and Dante was the best option available. Dante had been following the stories, the cowled giant, the unforgiving knight, the forest that appeared and disappeared. He knew what those rumors meant before most people did. So when the Blood Angels fleet arrived in the Nihilus to investigate, they weren't just bringing reinforcements to the embattled Dark Angels chasing Abaddon and the Daemon Prince Vashtor, the Archiphon. They were looking for a ghost. They found one. The Lion rendezvoused with the Blood Angels fleet and stepped aboard their flagship, the Absolution's Ire, very much alive and considerably more dangerous than any ghost. And it was there, face to face with a Primarch he had only ever known through legend, that Dante did something that may prove more consequential than any battle he has ever fought. He sat the Lion down and told him what 10,000 years of sleep had cost him in terms of news. And in that briefing, Dante told the Lion something that stopped even a Primarch in his tracks. Roboute Guilliman was alive. Let that land for a second. The Lion had gone to sleep in the final days of the Horus Heresy, a catastrophe that had killed Sanguinius, crippled the Emperor, and left the Imperium a shattered wreck. As far as he knew, the roster of surviving loyalist Primarchs was short and not getting longer. He had woken into a galaxy he barely recognized, and now Dante was telling him that his brother, the Ultramarine, the administrator, the man who wrote the book that every Space Marine chapter has governed itself by for 10,000 years, was not just alive, but running the Imperium. You can almost see the expression on the Lion's face. That particular stoic, calculating stillness that his brothers always found unreadable. Somewhere behind it, the very specific relief of a man who has just learned that someone else is handling the paperwork. The Lion has never been interested in governance. He is a hunter, a monster slayer, a warrior who operates in the dark. The idea that Guilliman is alive and managing the Imperium Sanctus while the Lion carves out the other half is, from a purely practical standpoint, the best possible news he could have received. He doesn't have to do the administration. Guilliman exists. The taxes are someone else's problem. And Dante, for his part, is probably the most quietly hopeful he has been in centuries. Before the Lion's return, the old Blood Angel was carrying the dark half of the Imperium alone, regent of a region of space with no astronomican guidance, surrounded by enemies on every side, with resources that were never enough, and a body that even 15 centuries of Space Marine conditioning were beginning to show the strain on. Now there are two Primarchs in the galaxy, two of the Emperor's sons with their hands on the wheel. Maybe, just maybe, Dante can eventually pass the torch and finally rest. No, he cannot. The galaxy will not allow it. Get back to work, Dante. What happened at the Battle of Wormwood proved that the Lion's return was not ceremonial. Vashtor the Archiphane, a demonic entity seeking to ascend to become a fifth major chaos god, had spent the entire Arcs of Omen campaign collecting pieces of an ancient key. The final piece was hidden aboard the rock itself. The Dark Angels had been chasing him across the Nihilus. Now on the demon world called Wormwood, everything came together. The Lion Force walked directly into the battle, appearing before the Unforgiven. At the same time, the demon Primarch Angron, Primarch of the World Eaters and Servant of Khorne, was about to kill Dante. The Lion saved him. Then he fought Angron, A demon Primarch, a being of pure chaos fury empowered by a chaos god, one of the most destructive forces in the known galaxy. The lion drove the blade of his sword fealty into Angron's throat and used the Emperor's shield to finish the job, casting the demon Primarch's physical form apart and banishing his soul back to the warp. Vashtor still won. He used the chaos of the battle to steal the Tushulcha engine from the rock and complete his key. The wormwood itself activated some ancient terrible mechanism and had to be destroyed from orbit. What remained of Caliban, already a graveyard, died its final death. But the lion had announced himself to the galaxy. He is now formally declared the Knight of Nihilus. And now the question of the meeting with Guilliman becomes urgent. The logistics are not simple. The Great Rift separates them. Guilliman operates primarily in the Imperium Sanctus, managing the Indomitus Crusade and the political apparatus of Terra. The Lion operates in the other half, moving by forest walk between isolated systems. Crossing the rift is possible but dangerous, and regular communication between the two halves of the Imperium is erratic at best. But it will happen. When it does, think carefully about the two men standing across from each other. Guilliman is a transformed man. He came back from the dead, already grieving 10,000 years of history, saw his father on the Golden Throne, and has been processing what that vision means every day since. He runs the Imperium with the cold efficiency of someone who knows exactly how desperate the situation is and refuses to let despair slow him down. But it costs him. The records that exist describe a Primarch who argues with those around him, constantly seeing the fanatical abomination the Imperium has become. He is a man of reason confronting evidence that reason cannot fully encompass. He knows his father is dying. He knows the Imperium cannot survive the Emperor's death in its current form. And he has not yet found an answer. The Lion is a different kind of changed. He came back not through resurrection, but through a mysterious healing sleep, guided by entities he doesn't fully understand, in a dimension that spoke to him in Arthurian metaphor. He met, or dreamed, or witnessed a vision of a wounded king by a river whose waters sang. He came out carrying questions about the Emperor's condition that Guilliman has been carrying since he stood before the throne, but where Guilliman saw the reality of the Golden Throne directly, the Lion's encounter was filtered through symbolism, through mere Caliban's strange language of allegory and myth. When they meet, they will compare what they know, and that comparison will be devastating. Guilliman will describe the throne room, the skeletal figure plugged into ancient machinery, the cables and life support systems fused to what was once the greatest human being who ever lived. The psychic energy still radiating from a body that should have been dead 10,000 years ago, sustaining the Astronomicon, keeping the warp roads open, holding the demons back from a dozen critical points simultaneously. He will describe walking out of that room knowing that the Emperor cannot last indefinitely, and that the Imperium has no plan for what happens when he finally stops. The Lion will listen to all of that, and then he will tell Guilliman about the Fisher King. He will describe Mirror Caliban, the ghostly forest, the old man by the river, who would not speak clearly but whose presence carried the weight of something vast and wounded. He will tell Guilliman what the Watcher in the Dark said, that the Lion was not asking the right question, because that is what the Arthurian Fisher King legend hinges on. The king is trapped in his suffering not by external force, but by the failure of the right person to ask the right question. Percival, the Knight of the Grail stories, passes through the Fisher King's Hall and sees the Grail and a bleeding lance, but fails to ask what they mean, and so the king remains unhealed. The implication hanging unspoken between two Primarchs who are both intelligent enough to see it is enormous. The Emperor may not simply be dying, he may be waiting. The question of whether humanity's greatest psyker, a being who planned for contingencies 10,000 years in advance, who whispered to Guilliman about hope, and who guided the Lion's healing sleep through the Watchers in the Dark, is passively failing or actively waiting for something is the most important question in the 41st millennium, and neither of them knows the answer. Beyond the theological weight of that conversation, there is the practical reality of the Imperium to discuss. Because both Primarchs are intensely practical men when they choose to be, and the galaxy is not going to wait politely while they process their feelings about their father. Guilliman will want intelligence on the dark side of the Imperium. For years, that half of the Imperium has been a black box. Worlds go silent, fleets vanish, the chaos forces that pour through the Great Rift operate largely unopposed because there is no coordinated response, no Astronomicon to navigate by, no reliable communication. The Lion has been inside that darkness. He has built a protectorate. He knows which worlds still stand and which have fallen, which warlords can be reasoned with, and which need to be destroyed. That knowledge is worth more than any number of additional regiments. The Lion will want to know about the Primaris Space Marines. He woke into a galaxy where his sons, the Dark Angels and the Unforgiven, had been upgraded with new implants developed by Call under Guilliman's ancient instructions. The new breed of Space Marine is physically superior to the old. The Lion, who has always been intensely invested in the quality of the warriors under his command, will have opinions about this, probably pointed ones, probably delivered with the particular Calibanite directness that his brothers always found unsettling. He will also want to talk about the Fallen. This is the Dark Angels' secret wound, the truth that has driven them for 10,000 years. The Fallen Angels, the Dark Angels who were on Caliban when it died, were scattered into the warp and have been appearing across the galaxy ever since. Sometimes as enemies, sometimes as wild cards, always as a source of guilt and obsession for the Unforgiven who hunt them. The Lion has already made a decision on this that the Dark Angels chapters never expected. He has pardoned the uncorrupted fallen, the ones who fought for reasons that were complicated rather than simply evil, and called them the Risen. This rewrites 10,000 years of Dark Angels doctrine overnight. Guilliman will need to understand what that means for the broader political structure of the Unforgiven chapters. And beneath all of it, the question that neither of them can escape. What do they do about the Emperor? Guilliman has been struggling with this since the moment he woke. He has pursued every avenue he can access within the Imperium Sanctus. Call works on technological problems constantly, though his methods are unorthodox enough to make even Guilliman uncomfortable. The search for any means of stabilizing or improving the Emperor's condition is ongoing, but the Golden Throne is ancient technology that even the Adeptus Mechanicus doesn't fully understand, and the Emperor himself has been beyond communication in any conventional sense for 10 millennia. The Lion brings something different to this problem. His time in Mirror Caliban and his access to Forest Walk suggests he has a connection to the warp, or at least to its subrealms, that is unlike anything Guilliman possesses. The Watchers in the Dark clearly have knowledge that extends well beyond what any human institution has access to, and the Fisher King encounter, whatever its ultimate meaning, indicates that the Lion has been closer to whatever the Emperor is now than almost any other living being. 2 sons, 1 galaxy cut in half. A father who has been dying for 10,000 years and maybe waiting for a question no one has thought to ask yet. The meeting between Lion L. Johnson and Roboute Guilliman will not solve all of this. They are Primarchs, not gods. They have limits, and the problems arrayed against them are vast enough to humble anyone. But they are also, between the two of them, the most capable strategic partnership that humanity has ever produced. Guilliman builds. He administers, reforms, plans, sustains. The Lion hunts. He strikes, disappears, appears somewhere else, cuts through problems that cannot be administered away. The Imperium Sanctus needs a builder. The Imperium Nihilus needs a hunter. For the first time in 10,000 years, both are available. The galaxy should be grateful. Its enemies definitely aren't.